how I like to frame Slip is email is a marketing channel, SMS is a marketing channel, push notification is a channel potentially. Slip is just another marketing channel that use digital receipts as the platform by which to send that. And I think that's the core difference in the way we're framing what we're doing. We are not a digital receipt solution. We are an offline marketing channel that uses digital receipts as the medium by which to serve those messages.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy at leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify. Got a really interesting conversation today. It's about transforming shopping receipts for retailers into opportunities for engagement, loyalty, and post-purchase customer experience. We love looking at new innovative tech on this podcast. So I'm really happy to welcome Tash Grossman, who's the founder and CEO at Slip. Hey, Tash, how are you?
Hey, James. I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Rose. Thanks for joining us. I really enjoyed being on the panel with you a few weeks ago at the Aldo event. Really enjoyed listening to your founder story, the product story, and we're going to get into both of those today. So before we do your story, let's give people some context about what is Slip and what is the purpose for shoppers.
Sure. So digital receipts have been around for a really long time. So anyone listening that is a shopper will be picturing some form of PDF invoice that gets sent to them after quite a horrible process of having to either recite your email or spell it into a keyboard with kind of no vision of what you're typing. It's like, I could be anyone today. For retailers, they really came around kind of 10 years ago when e-commerce started as a method of data capture, which is, I know everything about my customer online and I know very little about them in store. Wouldn't it be great if we could capture their data? And that is really all that they ever evolved to do. So what we've done at Slip is really recognize an opportunity around post-purchase experience, which is so clearly leveraged in e-commerce, and bringing it into physical retail by actually making digital receipts work. So Slip seamlessly links with point of sale systems and CRM platforms to dynamically engage customers post-purchase by actually making a digital receipt work.
Yeah, I love that actually making it work, because I've been asked so many times for an email address, and then actually there's no real value proposition in there. And this is one of the hardest things, is getting people to actually give a toss and care, because there's a value to them. And let's start with the career and into technology founder, because what I really enjoyed reading up about the history to this is that this started, obviously the seed of this idea came from being frustrated and not being able to return an item of clothing yourself because you couldn't find the receipt. I think most people listening can have it. I've had it recently where I had to then go on, access my bank account, had to install the app on a Wi-Fi so I could access my account to get a statement to show them I'd made the purchase. And I was thinking, this is just utterly ridiculous. So let's start your career path, and then what made you decide that, okay, that's a frustration, but what made you decide to give this a go and start to pivot into tech?
Sure. So I have always been very entrepreneurial. I used to be a Dragon Third apprentice, think that that's going to be me one day. And I went into a career in management consulting. So I really liked the whole premise of no 2 days are the same, and really being kind of a 21-year-old in a room with a CEO of a FTSE company and just telling them what to do. Like, I felt like that really suited my personality. So I was consulting, I did my graduate scheme, and then I moved to a different consultancy where I was really focused on digital transformation. And I've always been very fascinated with how tech can make your life better, less on the how tech can remove people. And obviously that's in the kind of AI buzz now, really in the how can it be used for processes and people. But yeah, quite rightly, as you said, I was shopping one weekend in Zara and I'd gone to return a pair of trousers. The buckle had broken. Queued for half an hour. If anyone has been in a returns queue in Zara on the weekend, they know that there is a specific queue for people like us who want to return, and they make it as painful as possible. Got to the front of the queue and they just wouldn't let me exchange or get a refund because I'd lost the receipt. And I don't know why, because it happened. That definitely wasn't the first time that happened to me. And for some reason, I just couldn't get it out of my head. So when I first started, I was trying to validate, like, is that a problem that we as consumers care about? Do we all care enough about losing receipts? And I did market research and some surveys. And I did validate that it is something customers care about, but not enough to pay to solve it. And I think that's a really common problem when you're building a startup, is that you experience a problem and you want to solve it, and other people want it to be solved too, but you wouldn't pay to solve that. So you need to try and find like the monetary angle. Anyway, fast forward, I was, this was all like alongside my job. So I was working kind of 50-hour weeks in consulting and then doing this in kind of my evenings and weekends. And then I uncovered the omni-channel problem, which was when you buy something online, a retailer knows everything about you. And when you buy something in store, they know nothing about you. And that felt like a sexier problem to solve than Tash and people that she knows loses their receipts. So put that into a pitch deck, and I went to quit my job. And really, like, I often get asked, like, what was that kind of inflection point, that moment where you thought, okay, now's the time? And there's never a good time. Like, there's always something. But I used to ask myself this question of like, what's the worst that could happen? And I pictured, I talk about it quite a lot. I pictured being in Starbucks and someone coming up to me. I don't even drink coffee. I don't know why Starbucks was the given location, but someone would come and tap me on the shoulder and say, oh, I've read all about Slip on LinkedIn. It sounds amazing. How's it going? And I would turn around and say, oh, I gave it a really good go for 6 months, but couldn't find the market there or didn't get the funding. And now I'm back in consulting. I would feel a bit embarrassed for maybe a minute, and then I just get on with my day. And at that time, that was the worst that could happen. Now there's a lot worse, but that for me was my, why not give it a go? So I took 6 months sabbatical from work. So I had all the kind of security of coming back to my job if it didn't work out. And then I put all of this idea on a pitch deck and just nagged and found my way to a pre-seed funding round. And kind of we've had lots of changes and pivots since then. And the whole post-purchase experience thing didn't really exist when we first started. But yeah, it was, it's been great. I will hand on heart say I've now spent almost the same amount of time as a founder as I did kind of working for someone else. But the learning is incomparable. Like, I've learned so much in the last 3 years that I don't think you could possibly learn if you were just working in a big organization.
Yeah, I love that. Like, everyone who launches their own business, startup, consultancy, agency, whatever it is, there's a trigger point, and that trigger is either it's your own proactive one, or it's a reactive to something. On my one, having been running my own business for 16 years, was having a massive issue, a personality clash with my CEO in an agency, which ends one way, which is where you go on gardening leave. So I don't think it matters the path you get to. I think you all have to reach that point where you go, like you said, that you don't want to in a few years' time look back and go, oh, I didn't really give it a go. You want to meaningfully commit to it, and then if it doesn't work out, go, fair enough. I love that. So let's talk about that learning curve, because I think anyone who's been in a leadership role or founded something like it can attest to the fact that you make mistakes, you learn fast, and you change your approach as you learn from it. So what are the key things you've learned going from the management consultancy into being a founder and running a product?
Okay. So I think the first thing I've learned is that mistakes are always going to happen. So I am a bit of a perfectionist, and I really didn't ever like the idea of scrappy. I always wanted things to be kind of perfect and finished. And I think that was something I learned very quickly on, which is you do not learn without failing first. And my CTO, Eddie, has a really great expression that he uses around mistakes, which is mistakes are always going to happen. And our job is to make sure they impact the smallest amount of people for the shortest amount of time. And actually, I really like it. And then I added my own little Tashism to the end and we learned something from them. So mistakes should never happen twice. And I think it's a lesson that you can take into both your professional and personal career, which is if you have a growth mindset, actually mistakes and failures are only going to help you to grow, because as long as you're taking key learnings from them. So I think that's probably been my biggest. I think one that I'm still forever evolving to is around prioritization, which is there is only so many hours in the day and there is only so many people in your team. So when you are a founder, you feel like it's your job to say yes to everything. But actually, we're now at the point in the company where I have to be a bit more conservative with what I say yes to and really think, okay, how is this going to impact my other client or this prospect's request or what the team are working on at the moment? And I think getting that balance right is really difficult. And if anyone listening has the answer, like send it to me, because I am really trying to figure it out. And I think that on top of that, just team, I think unless you've managed big teams in the past and also multifunctional teams, I've never had experience in being the CEO of a company that employs lots of engineers or also hiring product people. So the whole how you manage people and process is very new. And I think one of the things that I've always done is have a network of other founders who are on very similar journeys. Always helpful to have people that are on the same journey as you and someone that's 2-3 steps ahead of you, because no one every business is so unique and not everyone's problems are going to be the same. But if you find people that are likely to be going through similar things, it's really helpful to have a community to bounce things around with.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely, I've learned on that in my own process of building my consultancy and running it is I'm surrounded by loads of leaders in ecom, but understanding people who've run consultancies specifically, because it's a slightly different set of challenges. But let's now come back onto the product, the proposition, and I guess the consumer piece and the retailer lens, because you touched on earlier that often people don't want to pay, they want stuff, but they don't want to pay for it. And where does that monetization and where do the commercials lie? But let's look at the value prop for retailers. So why should retailers care about receipts? Why should they take it more seriously? And how do you find most currently use them, and what are the limitations of that?
Sure. So I think if we take it to the why, which is we know that customer acquisition costs are rising. They are rising in every single category, regardless of what you sell. I think the industry is saying they're up about 60%. And the key fact is that it can cost anything between 5 and 25 times more to acquire a customer than to retain one. So every retailer that we speak to is trying to think about retention, which is how can I get more out of my existing customer, either through increasing their basket size, increasing their shopper frequency, but also increasing their elements of brand and community and brand love and what I call loyalty with a big L. It's like, why am I loyal to this business? And you sit there and you say that in front of a room of retailers and everyone nods like, yeah, we're talking about that. We passed the test. Then you say that one of the ways that they've done this over the last decade is through the post-purchase experience. So everything that happens after the buy button. And there are some exceptional businesses out there who really focus and specialize in what happens after the buy button, because someone worked out that the order confirmation email is the most opened message that you're going to send to a consumer. So if you can find some form of monetization and revenue opportunity in that, it could drive incremental revenue. And that is because service-based messages have almost a 10 times higher open and engagement rate than generic marketing comms. So when we speak to omni retailers, they anywhere between kind of 10 and 40% of their e-com revenue is driven from post-purchase experiences. I was with a retailer recently who said they generate the same amount of revenue from their service-based messages to them, all of the marketing messages that they send out to consumers. And that ratio, by the way, is almost like 1 to 100. So it's insane opportunity. And again, every retailer nods and they say, yeah, we do that. And that's why there's been this huge battle between e-com and CRM teams of who should own that email. And then you hit them with but 70% of all retail still takes place in physical stores. And you kind of see this people kind of see like 1 plus isn't equaling 2 right now, because we've got this entire marketing stack and this entire process for our smallest group of shoppers that drives incremental revenue. But we're giving our in-store shoppers either a piece of paper that, how many people have ever actually read the receipt, unless you're trying to find out how many days you have to return it, or with some form of PDF attachment that gets sent out post-purchase in a rubbish email template, because someone once decided that was the role of e-receipts. And that is when we see people actually nod and think, oh yeah, we really see where this is going here. So Slip's role is to really sit like your post-purchase experiences for e-com, if not better for physical retail. So we dynamically integrate with the CRM to make sure that every receipt is completely personalized to that end consumer. And it's dynamically updated based on their customer profile. So perfect example, I'm wearing a denim jacket today from M&S. And I know there are a pair of matching trousers. I couldn't find them for the life of me when I went in store. I saw them on the module outside in the mannequin. I couldn't find them in store. Maybe they were out of stock. Now, post-purchase, if M&S were using Slip, I would have a recommendations line that said style it with, and it could link me to those trousers. And we could get even more personal, which is in my CRM profile on M&S, they know what size I typically wear because I've shopped there many times. So actually that could even go as far as dynamically updating the recommendation if it's got it available in my size. And it's thinking about those personalization elements that you would expect on e-com, but bringing it into physical retail. And it might not be about another purchase. It could be joining their loyalty program. So if you're not a member of their loyalty scheme, how can they acquire you in? So we don't sit here and tell a retailer what their next best action could be. We almost present them as a pick and mix menu, or here are all of the things that could drive incremental revenue post-purchase. And then we track and measure and monitor it. So coming back to your initial question around where's the value, I just need one metric in a retailer, which is either what is the value of a customer record, or what's the value of a loyalty scheme customer, or what's the value of a customer review. And then they almost make back the ROI on just one metric, and all of the other things are just benefit thereafter. But it's really linking it to key business value and key business results.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you pulled out the loyalty and retention piece. I'm running a panel this week at a Validify event about retention, and we were talking about so much is done around trying to monetize people post-purchase with buy this, buy this, buy this, but not enough is focused on removing friction from purchase and post-purchase. And the ex-CRM leader, Rafa, was talking about that, about the first thing you do when unless you're just a mass discount seller, the first thing you do if you're serious about building customer loyalty is make life easy for them, give them the information that's useful, help them get the most out of their product. And I can see why this fits in really nicely with that, because it's the last thing you want when you're trying to find info is having to scrabble around. You write pieces of paper, and Jesus Christ, I don't know anyone apart from my dad actually who's amazing at this. Whoever knows where any receipts are. Even I sometimes try and keep them because I know this is a pain in the ass, and then I forget where they are because I've probably recycled them. So yeah, I really like that, removing friction. But you touched on as well about people being under cost pressure. And I often see as well, but we're in omni-channel where the retail and e-com teams have different ownership paths. Like there might not be the same leadership team member. So the next question I've got for you is about barriers you often come up against when pitching to retailers. And I guess this leads into how do you tackle them? But also, what advice would you have for e-com folk to help try and get buy-in with the retail side?
Yes, I think that there are two common team silos that we see in organizations. I think retail and e-com is one, which is our product can have direct impact on e-com revenue, right? So I'm a physical store shopper, I'm then being promoted something for e-com, and then I drive an e-com sale. And that can sometimes cause friction because retail want that sale to be attributed to them because it's a repeat purchase from in store. And I just think if you were starting a modern day business today, let's say some of these pure play D2C channels that only have e-com and are now opening physical retail, I can guarantee you they're not running on separate P&Ls because they are one business and retail is just an additional channel like TikTok shoppers to their business, right? It's not seen as two separate businesses. And I think that's a real problem with legacy retailers where they're running on separate P&Ls. And we're starting to see it a bit less, but it still is a key challenge. I think on top of that, you then have another organizational challenge, which is in retail, this disparity between who decides what technology is being used. Is it tech or is it the business? So in some organizations, tech's role is to go out and find new cool things and procure them and then say to the business, I found your new digital receipt solution, here are your benefits. In other organizations, it's the business to go out and say, we want a new digital receipt solution. We found one, tech, can you implement it? And actually, every organization has some form of different balance there. So when you are selling into those organizations, it's really difficult to find out. And it's quite an awkward question to ask someone, like, do you have the authority to make this decision? So it's something that we're trying to learn. I think in terms of common pushbacks, we do get but could we build this ourselves? And I actually have got to the point where I almost start off the pitches by saying everything I'm going to show you, you could build yourself, but it would take you X amount of months, X amount of resource. You would have to update it. Every time you onboard a new market, you would have to change something. And it comes into this buy versus build decision that I think has been very common in retail as an industry. And I think the rise of things like the MAC Alliance and composable commerce and unified commerce and all these buzzwords has meant that people are trying to move to a more composable architecture where you are outsourcing plug and play, because it means if you do change your CRM system, not everything's going to break and then you can just replug it in. So I think those are some like really, really common objections. I also find like, where does this sit in the organization? Because retail are the day-to-day users of the tech by making their processes better or using a new system. Tech implement it, but marketing are really beneficiaries of it because we're growing the customer database and therefore the incremental revenue opportunity. So we typically find our best owners are in like marketing, technology, digital functions, which typically sit between retail and ecom.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The depending on who has the louder voice in some of the legacy businesses is always a challenge. And I've had a lot of conversation recently actually with businesses that are going through this modernization, and sometimes the kind of blockers get lifted when a person who's been in a role for a long, long time with a particular view on the role of tech moves, and somebody who's maybe more collaborative across the business and not so fixed on a very specific set of tech restrictions. So it's amazing how sometimes actually those barriers disappear overnight in businesses. Another part, because there are so many facets to Slip, and this is what I was really impressed with when I was listening to you and found out also when I've looked at the product, is it's not just receipts. It's all those other customer experience and loyalty pieces. So let's go through a few of those. So one of the challenges retailers face is addressable audience size and maximizing that, because e-com teams want to get as much digital data for customers that they can use in their other marketing. How does Slip help there with increasing like opt-in rates? What results have you seen?
Sure. So one of the great ways, I think when opt-in came in and GDPR, especially for in-store, a lot of retailers ran away from capturing data in-store because it became very terrifying around the responsibility of the colleague to get it right. And I've been in stores where I've just seen them tick the opt-in box and not even ask me. And I look at them and think, do you know I have an ISO accreditation here? Like, I'm a GDPR nerd, untick that box. But one of the ways that we found that to really help is allowing the customer to input the data on their own device. So during the kind of packing process, the queue, there are lots of ways where retailers can get that customer opt-in. And one of the ways we've seen it is through this like welcome 10 journey. So it's almost possible that when you're in store, and by the way, this is also a friction that I've had it where I've been in a retail store and I've seen a product that I like, but I know I can get 10% discount if I buy it online. So I will just go home and order it online, and actually with a discount, depending on the product and how much time I have. So one of the ways we've helped is allowing retailers to bring that into store. So for example, one of our customers, Aldo, they give 15% off to customers online. They felt like it was fair to replicate that into store, and they wanted to use it to drive incremental revenue. And about 70% of all of their transactions take place in stores. So we built them a kind of custom landing flow where you're at the checkout. During the bagging process, the colleague will ask you if you shopped there before. If not, direct you to a QR code. That then brings you to a landing page where you input your own data. So you don't have to recite it to the colleague. You opt in for marketing, and then you get a digital wallet pass where you can add it to your wallet. You can just use it one time, but then that links your record into the POS, creates you in their CRM, which is Klaviyo, applies a discount, and then you get your receipt after. And that's all happened on your own device. And we saw that they increased their data capture by like 25 times, so about a 600% increase. And also 92% marketing opt-in rate, and which is like incredibly high. So it grew that contactable customer database so significantly, where they're already seeing uplift in e-com sales because those customers are now going through that standard post-purchase experience flow. So I think that's one way, which is allowing the customer to input on their own device. And I think wallet passes are a phenomenal way to do that, because as a customer, especially if I'm shopping somewhere quite frequently, I don't want to have to tell you my name and my email address or my phone number every time I come in. So how can we remove that friction? And I think wallet passes are great. I mean, if I look on my phone, I've got loads, and yes, some of them I might use once a year, but I know that they're there if I do.
And on the loyalty theme, you were talking about before about the M&S example, how that can be used powerfully to provide relevant like product suggestions, promotions. I'd like to get a little bit more deeply into that, how that works functionally, because you obviously have your product, you have the retailers, e-com platform, other tools, CRM for segmentation. So what role, how does Slip fit in technically to this? How do you get data, and how are you able to then surface relevant recommendations to get great personalization?
Sure. So with loyalty, we've kind of got you've got positioning sheets where acquisition is the whole, I'm in a store. They ask me if I'm a member of the loyalty program. I say no. It means I have to download an app if I want to become one. There's 30 people in the queue behind me. I've been queuing for 10 minutes. I just want to get out of that, right? So that's one way that we can help, which is, are you a member of our loyalty program? No worries. We can send you a link to join via your receipt. What's your phone number? Send it via a text. Give the customer the ability to retrospectively earn those points. And we have partnerships with loyalty schemes where, as the customer goes to sign up to the loyalty platform, we will pass the transaction amount to the loyalty provider and say, this customer is eligible for 10 points or 100 points or £10 cashback, whatever the mechanic is. Then you've got the post-purchase loyalty journey, which is if I'm in store and I've identified myself through my loyalty scheme, I may get an email receipt, but it will be like a standard transaction email comms, the ones we spoke about. Now, what we can do is massively enrich that receipt because we know they're going to have a high open rate. So there is a UK retailer, I won't name them, their digital receipts that they send to their loyalty customers have a 90% open rate in that app. It is the most highly opened push notification that they send in that app. More commonly, 70% get looked at twice. So it is the most powerful real estate that they have, but it's just a list of items in a very ugly format, right? So we know that it can hold loads of value. So what we do is we sit with a dynamic feed into the CRM where we're constantly pushing data in and pulling data out, understand that customer's profile and therefore what their next best action could be. So if we take a retailer that sells suits, you might have gone online and bought a pair of trousers, but you actually wanted to go in store to try on the blazer because you were unsure about your fit. Now, if that data wasn't linked into CRM, you would get a PDF receipt that actually may even have recommendations, and it would probably recommend you the trousers that you've already bought. Now, on top of that, you're going to keep getting emails from their ESP saying, buy the matching blazer, buy the matching blazer. James, that blazer would look great. Now, what we're doing is making sure that all of the data is going to one place, which is a CRM or CDP, making sure that's a real single view of the shopper, and then taking the recommendation feeds out of it. So somehow with all of that, if that was confusing, how I like to frame Slip is email is a marketing channel, SMS is a marketing channel, push notification is a channel potentially. Slip is just another marketing channel that use digital receipts as the platform by which to send that. And I think that's the core difference in the way we're framing what we're doing. We are not a digital receipt solution. We are an offline marketing channel that uses digital receipts as the medium by which to serve those messages.
I think that's probably the most succinct way to position it, and I like that. So it's
just with that one.
Yeah, I know, but it's good. I think it helps me to understand. But I mean, I could spend hours sitting down. I'd love to have a more detailed demo at some point, anyway. But the integration bit is always fascinating because all retailers have different tech stacks on it, which is always good fun. But you mentioned loyalty stacks that you already have integration with. Do you want to it would be really interesting for our listeners to know which ones you're currently working with or you have deep integrations with.
Yeah, so the one that we have the deepest integration with is Eagle Eye. So obviously they're massive across enterprise. And for us, like that evolves even further, which is for your receipt to be able to show you how many loyalty points you earned on that purchase. But even like we've discussed how we can take that even further, which is in the recommendations line that you're being recommended complimentary products. It can tell you how much your price would be based on your loyalty balance. And it's how can you make that so seamless for the customer? And it all comes back to what you were saying around removing this friction, which is, okay, it's £100, but am I able to use that with my loyalty points, or what offers do I have against that product? And I think it's all about making that next best action really clear for the shopper. I do think it's important to talk about like consumerism and sometimes, if a retailer has a purchase frequency of 2 to 4 times a year, which is probably the most common in fashion and apparel, the likelihood of a consumer purchasing within 5 minutes of just purchasing is unlikely. However, there are so many other things that you can do in that moment that could be impactful around getting customer feedback, voice of the customer surveys. We're speaking to a retailer at the moment about community and events, which is all the stores have local budgets to run events. And actually what they want to be able to do is segment. So if a customer spends over a certain amount, invite them to an event on their receipt. But you just wouldn't be able to do that if it was all kind of static PDF content.
Yeah, interesting. And so one area that I think a few clients I work with where they have subscriptions, product subscriptions, it's a small percentage. And they're now actively looking strategically at how they grow that because recurring revenue, customer retention, helping to get people into more regular purchase of the year rather than shopping around promiscuously to other brands. There's a massive benefit. Are you currently doing anything with retailers around using receipts to then provide relevant subscription offers? Is that currently an active thing, or is it something that you're talking with people about?
It's something that we're talking about. It's not something that we've seen live with any of our customers yet. I think the area that we found it to be potentially the most impactful is in beauty, which is, especially in beauty, you're often loyal to the brand rather than the retailer that you bought it in. So if I take an example, I wear a Tatcha skin cream. I wear it every day. I don't really care where I buy it from. I'm probably going to buy it from Space NK, but I may buy it from Selfridges if I'm in there. I could buy it in John Lewis. So I'm open. Now, if I was in Space NK and on my receipt it said subscribe and save, set up a subscription and you'll save money by doing so, I would do it straight away. Because I know that it lasts me exactly 3 months every time. And if I knew it was going to arrive to my house, it would just be great. Yeah. I think subscriptions is a great opportunity. I've seen it in kind of food and beverage a bit. You go into Nespresso, you buy a coffee machine. How can you get set up on a subscription? You go into Hotel Shock and buy a velvetizer. How can they convince you to keep buying the chocolate? So I think there are some great, I think with subscriptions where it's really interesting is in this like retail media world of complementary subscriptions. So there was a use case with an electronics retailer that we're speaking with where I went in and bought AirPods, these ones. And at the end of the purchase, a second receipt came out, which gave me a code to sign up for Apple Music, and I would get 3 months free. And that's a very like classic retail media angle, complementary product, addressable audience. But by the time I'd gone to put that code in, it had disappeared because the receipt paper had faded. And I think that is an unbelievable opportunity for retailers. And I don't know if we're going to talk about retail media. It's like my favorite thing at the moment. But, today, a paper receipt is not a retail media asset. Like it's pointless, but it is the inevitable thing that every customer is going to leave the store with. So if you digitize them and actually you would be able to sell that space to Apple by telling them exactly how many people are going to see that based on your digital receipt open rate, and how many people are buying AirPods. It's so fascinating. I could talk about that for hours.
It is, and that's like prompted two things. Number one is so I've worked with quite a few D2C brands who sell across other retail channels, and having a strong D2C proposition to give customers a reason to shop directly with you, where you get greater margin and you get the customer data. That's quite challenging because you can't do it on price because the big retailers typically discount higher. But actually things like this where you can then better control the customer experience and you can offer things of benefit that they won't get in the wider partners is really, really interesting. But I can also see big brands. So I've worked with quite a few CPG businesses that sell across massive retailers, and the big, huge like supermarkets, for example, they charge for marketing visibility in the digital store. I can quite easily see a digital receipt becoming another one of those monetization routes for them to give additional brand visibility.
Yeah, for sure. I think the retail media angle is massive. And I think because it can be so product specific, like we're not just saying, there's not just a ad on the confirmation page of a website. We can configure it that if a customer buys a specific brand, show them this. And the retailers can build those kind of configurations and rules in our platform really easily.
The one area that that's really big in, specifically in fashion at the moment, is collabs, where, you know, there's so many examples of brands getting together to try to tap into complementary audiences and extend their product, or even do custom product drops for that specific partner. When we talked, you said that's an area that's of interest. Where's your head at in terms of where that fits in, like, priorities roadmap? Are people demanding it yet, or is this more about you wanting to innovate?
So I think collabs between retailers are really interesting, and it kind of goes into this retail media angle, which is they're great, but if it's sold in one place, only one person's going to get the data from that. So I think there's about real transparency to the consumer. I think consumers don't like the idea of their data being shared without their consent. So I think if the consumer, you know, we spoke about one where there's a retailer that has like a shop in shop concept, and how you can almost earn double loyalty points by going there, because we can work with the loyalty provider to make sure that the points are attributed correctly. But you can transact on one POS, but you can get rewarded kind of twice. And I think that's something that always fascinates me with kind of collab propositions, which is how can I use the receipt for authenticity to redeem like double points or get, you know, offers and rewards from the collab audiences. So it's something that we're seeing from this like retail media side come up more and more, which is how can we collaborate with our brand partners and our, you know, fashion collaborators in a way where we can mutually benefit from data acquisition, and our platform can massively help them do that.
Got a question around the implementation side, because our audience on the pod is a mix between technical focus, business trading, e-com leadership. And anyone who's in like a head of an e-com manager role will want to know, how do you integrate? What's the path to live? So can you gave the example of Aldo earlier, for example, and I know your core integrations with the POS systems where you do a lot of the configuration, but from starting to talk to customers to being able to get live, what do you have a typical path? Is it really dependent?
So it is dependent on their systems. I mean, we do have really good coverage when it comes to integrations today. I'd say pretty much all of the leading CRM and CDP platforms are already very integrated with and have great relationships with, as to for POS. So what we typically do is, if a retailer is using a POS that we're already integrated with and doesn't have too much kind of bespoke configurations and a CRM, the integration can be as fast as 20 minutes. So like Aldo was about 25 minutes. We're onboarding another customer at the moment who uses Shopify and Klaviyo, and it's a form, right? Here's an API key, give us one back. You're live. Like it can be that simple. I think and I've been on 2 technical integration calls this morning, so it's very top of mind. But when a retailer is on something that we haven't integrated with, what we typically do is try and the path that is the least complicated is often just, how are you sending digital receipts today? And can you just send us that data instead? And we try and make it as simple as possible. And what we typically do is create here's a way we can do it, and it's not perfect. Here's a perfect way. And there's probably 3 or 4 in the middle. Where do you want to get to? It's really important for us that we try and make the integration as seamless as possible for the retailers, because everyone is struggling with tech resource at the moment, and how we can kind of time to value can be as fast as possible.
And in terms of like the e-com vendor ecosystem, so you've got the app in the Shopify store, and you've talked about Shopify Klaviyo, and Shopify dominates in many markets at the moment, but obviously there are a lot of other really good platforms with wide customer bases. Are you focusing on specific e-com platform ecosystems, or are you just staying agnostic?
So e-com is definitely agnostic, because for e-com, it tends to just be like all the data will go into CRM. So what we're doing really is sitting between the POS and the CRM to make sure that the CRM is enriched with in-store data. So we have thought in the past around the challenges is that there's so much fragmentation in the POS space, like way more than in e-commerce. Kind of e-commerce, there are really 5 providers that dominate 90% of the market. In POS, I mean, there's so many and they're all so split. So we have thought, shall we just focus on one POS vendor and go after all their customers? But actually because it's so easy once we're integrated, it doesn't really matter. So I think more so on, and again, like we've thought about this with category, which is we're really good in footwear. Like footwear was some of our first customers and athleisure wear. So shall we just go after everyone in footwear and athleisure wear? But then you've got the problem of you speak to an electronics retailer who don't want to be the fast electronics retailer. And then it's like, how do we acquire you? So we have an ideal customer profile. And I think what's really important is that they're not changing POS right now, because a POS change is like an 18-month project for a big retailer. And to integrate with an old POS to them to rip it out and start on a new one when we're probably integrated with a new one is a bit pointless.
Yeah. Oh God, the joys of trying to make timings work for putting in new tech when there are other bigger tech stack changes going on. Seems to be every project I work on. Tash, I've really, really enjoyed talking to you. I love listening about the product. I love your energy and enthusiasm for what you do. I mean, you would hope that founders have enthusiasm, but you can tell that you're genuinely passionate about helping retailers provide better customer experiences. If anyone wants to reach out and learn more or get a demo, how do they connect?
So sure, you can book a demo via our website, which is slipreceipts.com, or feel free to connect and reach out to me on LinkedIn. So yeah, Tash Grossman, and happy to have a chat with anyone. Amazing.
I shall leave you to enjoy the rest of the day. I know you're recovering from sleep deprivation for going to see the Spurs final. So I hope you catch up on your sleep and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, James.
Take care. Bye. You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.